So, have you ever stopped to think about a really universal but honestly kind of unspoken problem in medicine? I mean, what actually happens when a doctor and a patient just completely disagree on reality? Well, today we are digging into a totally fascinating new clinical tool designed to measure exactly that. Welcome to this explainer on the CBP GI, or the Clinical Brain Profile Global Impression Scale. Okay, let's just quickly look at our roadmap for today. We'll start with the measurement problem, introduce this new tool, break down the 3 dimensions of psychopathology, explore how we measure the insight gap, look at the scoring, and finally, peer into the future of diagnosis. Section 1. The measurement problem, when doctor and patient disagree. Right, so to understand why a new scale is absolutely vital, we really need to look at the flaws of our current psychiatric rating systems. Imagine the clinician's perspective on one side, that's your objective observation, and the patient's perspective on the other, their subjective, lived experience. The problem is traditional medicine really struggles to capture these two realities simultaneously. When a doctor's objective rating and a patient's subjective rating are collected in completely separate silos, or worse, when the patient's view isn't formally measured at all, we literally lose vital data about the patient's self-awareness. The bottom line is that our most widely used clinical tools are either way too narrow or they completely miss the patient's point of view. The old guard scales are super limited. You've got the HAM-D, which is specific only to depression. The PANSS is just for schizophrenia. The YMRS is for mania. Now, you might be thinking of the CGI, the Clinical Global Impression Scale. That one has been highly valued because it's brief and transdiagnostic, meaning it crosses diagnostic boundaries. But here's the catch. The CGI has no official synchronized patient-facing counterpart, and it offers absolutely zero grounding in contemporary neuroscience. It might tell a doctor a patient is markedly ill, but it doesn't tell them which neural systems are actually implicated. It's missing a huge piece of the puzzle. Section 2. A new brain profiling tool. Introducing the CBP GI. Enter the CBP GI, designed by Dr. Abraham Palet. It's remarkably brief and serves as this overarching solution to those systemic limitations we just talked about. Basically, it's a 6-item, transdiagnostic, dual-rating instrument. Dual rating is absolutely the operative word here. It's made up of 3 clinician-rated items and 3 structurally parallel patient-rated items. It is intentionally designed to capture both perspectives synchronously across any diagnosis without needing any modifications at all. Section 3. 3 dimensions of psychopathology, grounded in neuroscience. Unlike those older tools, the CBP GI maps psychiatric phenomenology directly onto the brain's circuitry, specifically the cortico-striato-thalamocortical circuits. It organizes all of this into 3 core dimensions. The first one is connectivity, or CON. To de-jargonize this a bit, connectivity is essentially the brain's ability to organize thoughts and integrate information across its large-scale networks. When this capacity gets impaired, the result is fragmented cognition. A patient might experience disorganized thoughts, perceptual disturbances, or even full-blown psychosis. It's basically a failure of narrative coherence in the brain. Okay, moving on to this second dimension, plasticity, or PLA. Think of plasticity as how well we adapt our moods and habits over time. It's our capacity for adaptive change across different timescales, everything from rapid synaptic firing to long-term structural remodeling. Now, when plasticity is impaired, it manifests as mood dysregulation, anhedonia, which is the inability to feel pleasure, or rigid compulsive patterns. This spans across depressive, bipolar, or even addictive presentations. It's like the brain gets stuck in a rut. The third dimension is context sensitivity, or CSX. Put simply, this is the ability to read the room. We all probably know someone who might lack a bit of this in everyday life, right? But in a clinical sense, impairment here involves deep theory of mind deficits, context-blind behavior, and really poor environmental responsiveness. If a person just cannot adjust their behavior to what is happening around them, they are showing high impairment and context sensitivity. Section 4. Measuring the insight gap, the CIG score. Now, consider the paradigm shift of insight as concordance. Traditionally, measuring a patient's insight into their own illness requires entirely separate, often really burdensome tests. But the CBGPI frames insight totally differently. It is simply the measurable level of agreement or concordance between the patient's self-rating and the doctor's objective rating. It's actually a structural output of the test itself, which is pretty brilliant. Here's how it works, mathematically. We calculate the absolute difference between the clinician score and the patient score for each dimension. If the discordance gap is 3, that indicates a severe gap between objective impairment and subjective awareness.
A gap of 3 signifies clinically significant anosognosia, which essentially means the patient is completely unaware of their own severe impairment.
What's really fascinating is how this mathematical gap translates directly into profound human neurobiological phenomena. If there is a large gap in the connectivity dimension, it reflects psychosis spectrum anosognosia. The patient literally cannot register their own cognitive disorganization. A gap in plasticity reflects affective unawareness or alexithymia, an inability to recognize one's own emotional flatness or mood dysfunction. And a gap in context sensitivity? That reflects social cognitive insight deficits. The patient overestimates their social competence and completely fails to see they aren't reading the room correctly.
Section 5. How the scoring works. Elegant math for complex problems. So, we've talked theory, but how does this elegant math actually play out in a busy clinical setting? Well, the administration process is brisk, energetic, and takes literally only 1 to 2 minutes. Here's the rundown. Step 1. The clinician rates the 3 items: connectivity, plasticity, and context sensitivity based on their interview and observation. Step 2. The patient simultaneously rates 3 parallel self-report items using highly accessible, non-pejorative language. For example, instead of asking some clinical question about context sensitivity, the patient is simply asked how well they understand social situations. Step 3. The absolute differences between those 2 ratings calculate the insight gap. And this brilliantly illustrates the elegant math behind the whole thing. Everything is rated on a really simple 1 to 4 ordinal scale. The clinician's global severity ranges from 3 to 12. The patient's total also ranges from 3 to 12. Finally, the total CIG, which is the sum of the dimension gaps, ranges from 0 to 9. A score of 0 means perfect concordance. They totally agree. A 9, on the other hand, would mean total global unawareness across all brain dimensions. Using a 4-point scale forces a distinct choice between normal and mild, avoiding that kind of spurious, fake precision you get with overcomplicated scales. Section 6. The future of diagnosis. Real-world impact. Let's zoom out from the scoring rubric for a second to explore how this instrument is poised to change longitudinal psychiatric care in the real world. You see, the CBP GI isn't just meant to live on a piece of paper. It is explicitly designed for integration into digital mental health platforms. Imagine an app, something like NeuroBuzzy, where a clinician and patient can input their ratings synchronously via a mobile application. The CIGI Insight scores are computed and displayed in real time. Clinicians can literally visualize the patient-clinician discordance over time, adjusting treatment as a patient's self-awareness hopefully improves. Of course, because it's a new tool, it has to be rigorously proven. The source material outlines a solid 4-phase validation framework. Phase 1 focuses on content validity through expert and patient advisory review. Phase 2 tests reliability, basically ensuring different raters get the exact same results. Phase 3 targets construct validity, checking if the CDP-GI actually correlates correctly with older scales like the PANSS or HAM-D. And Phase 4 assesses clinical utility and that awesome digital integration we just talked about. Which brings us to our final thought for today. The CBP GI gives us a quantified, measurable look at the divide between subjective experience and objective observation. But, it also leaves us with a pretty profound question. If a patient's reality differs completely from their doctor's, who truly holds the key to healing? By measuring this insight gap, we aren't just creating better data. We are building a roadmap for deeper empathy and a much more targeted treatment in mental health. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer.